Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we're jumping right into a step-by-step recipe for making a static web page come totally alive. We're going to break down the JavaScript onClick event to build a really slick, expandable content box. Honestly, it's one of those essential, lightweight UI patterns that perfectly bridges the gap between a page that just sits there and a dynamic experience that actually respects your user's attention and screen space. So let's dive right in. Right, so this is the big question in modern web design. You have all this great, in-depth content you want to share, but you know for a fact that hitting your reader with a massive wall of text is a guaranteed way to make them bounce. We want to solve the problem of a cluttered layout by creating a clean, interactive show more and show less component. It's fundamentally about giving the user total control over what they want to see, exactly when they want to see it, all without compromising the overall design of your site. Here is our game plan for today. The interactive goal: HTML and CSS foundations, selecting the elements, attaching the onClick event, writing the toggle logic, and finally, updating the button text. 6 simple steps. Section 1. The interactive goal: visualizing the final dish. Think about it. If you just dump all your paragraphs onto a page, your users are going to face endless scrolling, total information overload. But by designing a neat, expandable box, we give the user the reins. Interactivity is absolutely crucial here. We want a button that smoothly expands a hidden block of text when clicked, and then beautifully tucks it away when clicked again. It keeps our layout pristine and organized without ever forcing us to delete important, substantive content. Section 2. HTML and CSS foundations, prepping the raw ingredients. Before we even think about touching JavaScript, we need our structural bones. And, as our source notes, there is absolutely nothing fancy here, just dead simple HTML. We're basically looking at a basic container, a div with an ID of content that holds a few paragraph tags. And right underneath that, we've got an anchor tag serving as our button with an ID of show more. That is literally the entire markup. By keeping the HTML this minimal, we're sticking to the separation of concerns. This lets our CSS and JavaScript carry the weight of the interactivity without muddying up the DOM with unnecessary bloat. Now here's the clever CSS trick that makes this whole pattern so incredibly elegant. We aren't actually calculating and animating heights frame by frame with JavaScript. Instead, our content box has a default CSS state with a max height of 270 pixels. We then create a completely distinct class called Open that pushes that max height all the way to 1,000 pixels. Thanks to native CSS transitions, just flipping between these two states creates a silky, smooth animation. We're letting the browser's optimized rendering engine do all the hard work for us. To make sure that extra text doesn't spill out and completely ruin our layout in that default state, we rely on the CSS rule overflow hidden. It acts as a hard boundary. It tells the browser, hey, anything pushing beyond that 270 pixel threshold, keep it completely hidden from view. The extra paragraphs are essentially clipped, kept invisible, and cleanly out of the way until our user explicitly asks for them. Section 3. Selecting the elements, casting the actors for our script. All right, before JavaScript can actually trigger any action, it needs to grab hold of the DOM elements we want to manipulate. We map our HTML ID of content to a JavaScript variable named content, and our show more button ID to a variable named button. Caching these elements into variables right up front is a huge best practice. It keeps our code super clean, and it's highly performant because the browser only has to search the document once rather than looking for the element every single time a click happens. We use standard DOM querying for this, specifically document.getElementById, to establish these references. We just write document.getElementById content and store it in our content variable, and then do the exact same thing for the button. It is the most straightforward, reliable way to reach into that dead simple HTML and pull out the exact nodes we intend to bring to life. Section 4. Attaching the onClick event, setting up the trigger. Okay, let's take a quick look at where we are in our process. We've successfully cached our DOM elements. Now, at step 2, we need to build the bridge between the user's mouse and the browser. We have to set up an active event listener to wait for user input before we can even begin to write the actual animation logic. We build that bridge by binding an event directly to our cached button variable. By assigning an anonymous function to button.onClick, we're basically telling the browser, hey, every single time this button is clicked, execute the logic inside these curly braces. This is the actual heartbeat of our interface. It's that exact magical moment a static layout transforms into an interactive application. Section 5. Writing the toggle logic, the if-else brain. Inside that function we just created, we're asking the browser to evaluate a condition. We basically want to check the current state of our content box, and we do this with a straightforward if-else statement. First, we ask, does the content.className currently equal open? If the answer is yes, well, it means the box is already expanded to 1,000 pixels, so our necessary action is to shrink it. But if the answer is no, it means it's sitting at its default closed state of 270 pixels, so we're going to want to expand it. To expand the box, our else statement simply updates the class. We write content.className equals open. Instantly, the CSS takes over and it smoothly transitions to a 1,000 pixel height limit. To shrink it, our if statement removes that class by setting content.className to an empty string. The element instantly loses those properties and snaps right back to 270 pixels, re-hiding the text. We're letting CSS do all the heavy lifting of the visual animation, while JavaScript just acts as the state switch. This is a brilliant example of separation of concerns in modern front-end development. Section 6. Updating the button text. Adding the final polish. So our functionality works beautifully now, but leaving a button that says Show More sitting right under a fully expanded box, yeah, that's terrible UX. It's completely counterintuitive. We need to dynamically swap this text based on the component's state. We achieve this using the inner HTML property on our button variable. Reassigning it to Show Less ensures the interface communicates clearly and accurately with the user. We just drop this text update right into our existing if-else logic. When we apply the open class to expand the box, we simultaneously inject the Show Less text into the button. And when we remove the class to shrink the box, we revert the text back to Show More. It's a tiny detail for sure, but syncing your UI text perfectly with your application state is exactly what separates amateur code from a professional, polished, user-friendly product. And boom, just like that, we've built a fully functional, smooth animating content box. You've leveraged the DOM to cache elements, utilized onClick listeners to capture user input, and toggled CSS classes to create seamless interactivity without bogging down your JavaScript. It really is the perfect harmony of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript working together, each doing exactly what they do best. So now that you've mastered this essential UI pattern and understand the mechanics of DOM manipulation, what will you build next? The interactive possibilities are literally endless. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and happy coding!